committee to order. I'd like to welcome Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. And congratulations, Mr. Secretary. Congratulations on your service to the U.S. Army, to your service in the U.S. House of Representatives, as CIA Director, and now as our nation's 70th Secretary of State. The committee looks forward to working with you in a bipartisan way to meet our challenges and to seize our opportunities. We have made important progress on a major security challenge, routing ISIS on the battlefield. This is a big development, one that you've played a role in, and Mr. Secretary, we must maintain the momentum. Islamist terrorism will threaten us for years and years to come. Increasing pressure on Iran and checking its hegemonic moves is imperative. Our partner Israel is on the front lines, but Iran's ICBM program is a danger to us. Intercontinental means from there to here. Your Monday speech, Mr. Secretary, outlined a much-needed strategy to match Iran's range of hostile activities. The challenge now is to present a unified front with our allies. Last budget hearing, I said that our nation's long-standing commitment to global stability, open markets, alliances, and the rule of law and human rights has paid off greatly. If we don't lead, others will. Our formidable military, though, is only one side of the coin. You, Secretary Pompeo, have rightly recognized that diplomacy must lead our foreign policy. American diplomats serve on the front lines. We need them well-trained. I'm encouraged by the Department's interest in strengthening the Foreign Service Institute. And we need sufficient funding to combat wildlife and drug trafficking, to build open markets, to save lives during natural disasters, and do the many other things our aid accounts support. The appropriations process will adequately fund diplomacy and development, I believe. The National Endowment for Democracy, in particular, should be strongly supported. Let's face it, democracy is on the ropes worldwide. Supporting it is a moral and strategic good. NED is backing critical programming in Venezuela and Nigeria and worldwide. It is no time to cut this programming. On the challenge of Russia, yes, we should cooperate with Moscow when possible, but we must diligently protect our national security. The administration has rightly provided lethal arms to Ukraine, which remains under siege by Russian proxies. A far more severe threat is Moscow's information war. This committee has heard that Moscow's goal isn't so much to make Western citizens think this or think that. Russia's goal is to destroy all confidence in objective thought. By undermining fact-based discussions with lies, our enemies hope to gravely damage Western democracies. The State Department must aggressively counter disinformation through its Global Engagement Center, other means, and with Department officials speaking out for the truth. We wish the administration success negotiating with North Korea. It'll be a tall task to strike a viable, effective nuclear agreement. Ranking Member Engel and I have led efforts to ratchet up the financial pressure on North Korea over many years with the legislation that we've passed here in the committee. Keep up that pressure, Mr. Secretary. It is a big reason why the Kim regime wants to talk with President Trump. And as this process plays out, work closely with Congress. We're stronger together. And I'll now turn to our ranking member, Mr. Elliott Engel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Secretary. Welcome to the Foreign Affairs Committee. We always pride our committee in being the most bipartisan committee in Congress, and always say that when we believe, when we talk about foreign policy, partisanship should stop at the water's edge. It doesn't mean that we won't have disagreements, and some of those we're going to discuss today. But I think that this committee, perhaps more than any other committee in Congress, has worked very effectively to set up bipartisan majorities. So welcome, Mr. Secretary. You're no stranger here, and we look forward to what you have to say, obviously, today. After the administration sent its 2017 budget request, which we were very disappointed with, Congress's message was clear. Cutting diplomacy and development by a third was unacceptable. We sent that message through letters and statements, and finally with the 2018 funding bill. And let me say once again, bipartisan majorities stopped those draconian cuts from going forward. But this administration has ignored that message, unfortunately, and rejected the will of Congress. The White House wants to cut $334 million as part of a so-called rescission package. How short-sighted is this request? The day after we received these proposed cuts, including cutting $250 million from our Ebola response, reports surfaced of an Ebola outbreak in the DRC. The reason we fight pandemics overseas is so we don't have to fight them here at home. The American people, whether in New York or in Kansas, are concerned about things like Ebola because diseases don't respect borders. We cannot allow another outbreak to go unchecked because the White House considers arbitrary budget cuts to be good politics. Now, the State Department, and I realize this is all happening before you came, Mr. Secretary, so I'm hoping that you can work with us in trying to change these things and to right the wrongs. The State Department has now sent us another budget that would again slash diplomacy and development efforts that promote our security, that keep America safe. It's frankly insulting that the administration would send us another request like this when we rejected it last year. So I predict that Congress will reject this budget just as we did last year's. Again, Congress, on a bipartisan basis, rejected the budget. Fortunately, Congress has the final say on how much we spend on international affairs. But whatever the size of the check Congress writes, it's obviously the administration's job to make policy and manage departments. And, Mr. Secretary, I worry about what you've inherited at the State Department. The administration's first priority was an ill-conceived reorganization effort. It cost millions of taxpayer dollars for private consultants, but resulted in absolutely nothing beyond a demoralized and depleted State Department. On your predecessor's watch, the Department lost more than 200 Foreign Service officers, many among our most senior diplomats, some of the very experienced diplomats you once called incredibly professional. The Department will soon have only a single official with the rank of Career Ambassador, the highest rank of our diplomats. A staggering number of senior positions remain vacant. Perhaps most troubling are the allegations from whistleblowers who have reported to this committee that the administration has targeted career employees because of their perceived political beliefs. This is potentially a violation of laws governing State Department personnel. It also strikes at the idea that politics should stop at the water's edge, that the way we carry out foreign policy should put American interests first and leave partisan interests and concerns behind. It's how we run this committee. But that principle has been under attack recently. I think you can draw a line from the moment straight back to the most egregious example in recent memory of playing politics with a foreign policy, with a tragedy. I know the Benghazi Select Committee on which you sat, the creation that was set up to tear Hillary Clinton down, as the majority leader admitted, that was used to impugn the character of one of your predecessors. Partisanship has no place in the halls of the State Department. I'm glad the Inspector General is now looking into those whistleblower allegations. As Senator Menendez, Mr. Cummings, and I advised, but the Department has not produced the required documents that would allow Congress to conduct effective oversight, despite a commitment from the spokesperson to do so. So I hope, Mr. Secretary, that you'll help to get us those documents and that you'll leave behind any political considerations in the way the Department is run under your leadership. Unfortunately, after 16 months, we're feeling the effects of a foreign policy that has marginalized diplomacy and made Americans less safe. The President has alienated our friends, doubted the value of our alliances, and undermined American credibility around the world. The result? A recent Gallup poll put America's global approval rating at an historical low 30%, nearly 20% lower than the previous year. At the rate we're breaking our word and unwinding our country's commitments, I imagine we'll see that number dip even further. The administration's slogan of America First, it's looking, unfortunately, more like America Last and America Alone, and America by itself in the world, where we don't nurture alliances and cultivate new friendships, where we don't put our values at the center of our politics, where we don't help countries become stronger and more stable partners on the global stage. And America in that world is an America that's less safe. Perhaps the worst example that the administration has blatantly ignored is our ongoing threat to our security, which is Russia's attack on American democracy. As you said when you served as CIA director, we're staring another Russian attack in the face. I agree with you. I'm worried that the President is just going to let it happen. I'm worried that even if we did want to push back, the State Department is so hobbled and hollowed out that we won't be able to. I'm worried that the administration is giving Russia a pass because Putin supported President Trump over Hillary Clinton. If we allow foreign interference in our elections so long as it supports our political objectives, then we've put party before country and put our democracy in crisis. I would be just as outraged if the Russians helped Hillary Clinton. I think the Russians should stay out of our democracy. There are so many issues I could get into, but I want all our members to have a chance to ask questions today. There are tough questions, Mr. Secretary, but I look forward to working with you, and I know that your service here in the House will do you well in working together with the House to effectuate a better foreign policy for our country. Thank you.
This morning, I'm pleased to welcome Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to the committee. Secretary Pompeo previously served as Director of the Central Intelligence Agency and is a member of Congress representing the people of the 4th District of Kansas. Among his committee assignments, he served as a member of the Intelligence Committee. He also served in the U.S. Army and is a graduate of both West Point and Harvard Law School. And we appreciate the Secretary being with us today. Without objection, the witness's full prepared statement will be made part of the record. Members will have 5 calendar days to submit any statements or questions or any extraneous material that they might have for the record. The goal today is to get to all of our members. To make that goal, I'll ask members to be aware of their allotted 5 minutes. That's for your question, and that's for the Secretary's answers to your questions. We do have questions for the record. And speaking of that, I have a question for the record that I'd like to submit on behalf of Mr. Donovan, without objection, addressing the State Department's role in combating the opioid crisis that is ravaging communities across America. So we will begin now with Secretary Pompeo's testimony. Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Chairman Royce. Thank you, Ranking Member Engel. It's good to see you both again. And thank you, distinguished members of the committee that I had the privilege to serve with. It is great to be back. And I appreciate the opportunity to discuss the 2019 budget requests.
And Mr. Secretary, maybe if we straighten the microphone, it'll be...
Yes, how's that? Is that good enough?
Perfect.
All right, very good. And thanks. I want to talk about both State Department and USAID's budgets this morning. In order to achieve the objectives laid out in the National Security Strategy, we have a plan, and you'll hear a great deal about it today. The proposed request reflects our obligation to use taxpayer dollars wisely and effectively. Our request also makes clear the United States must exert a proportional financial commitment in the pursuit of goals shared by the entire international community. It's time for other nations, especially those with high GDPs, to assume greater responsibilities and devote greater resources towards our common objectives. Whether it's crushing terrorists, stopping Iran's malign behavior, strengthening the NATO alliance, eradicating infectious diseases, and so much more. We expect good help, good financial support from our partners and allies. President Trump is committed to diplomacy as the primary means of achieving the United States' foreign policy objectives. So am I. We must maintain America's historic role as a truly global power whose first instinct and overwhelming preference is to use diplomacy to solve global challenges. We're already seeing this in the preparations for our historic meeting with North Korea, still scheduled for June 12th. We have a generational opportunity to resolve a major national security challenge. Our eyes are wide open to the lessons of history, but we're optimistic that we can achieve an outcome that would be great for the world. Our posture will not change until we see credible steps taken towards the complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. On Monday, I unveiled a new direction for the President's Iran strategy. We will apply unprecedented financial pressure, coordinate with our DoD colleagues on deterrence efforts, support the Iranian people, perhaps most importantly, and hold out the prospect for a new deal with Iran. It simply needs to change its behavior. We seek to work with as many partners, friends, allies as possible to achieve the common objective of stopping all of Iran's nuclear and non-nuclear threats. The President's highest priority is keeping the American people safe. This request for $7.3 billion in security assistance will help protect Americans at home and overseas, and I look forward to talking more about that today. The State Department will continue to lead the international efforts to denuclearize North Korea and prevent other actors from unlawfully acquiring weapons of mass destruction as their means of delivery, while strengthening the capacity of partner nations to do so as well. Countering proliferation is at the top of President Trump's national security agenda. The budget request also calls for $5.7 billion in support for coalition efforts to continue to defeat ISIS and other transnational terrorists and criminal groups that threaten Americans everywhere. The State Department and USAID will sustain programs that address the conditions on the ground that give rise to those threats. And we will work diligently to attract additional donors to support these very same efforts. America's prosperity and national security depend on a strong and growing American economy. This budget request seeks $2.2 billion to help stimulate American economic growth by expanding markets for U.S. investment and ensuring that partner countries can fully participate in the global economy. America's message, a noble one, must be shared with the world at all times. Chairman Royce, you mentioned the Global Engagement Center. We will work with the $55+ million available to cover both its original mission, countering extremism, plus countering state-sponsored disinformation campaigns. We will not tolerate Russian interference in our 2018 elections. Much work has been done. There's more to do. Rest assured that we will take the appropriate countermeasures in response to the continued Russian efforts. Finally, let me also update you on what's happening inside the State Department. Our workforce is the most important asset. Since becoming Secretary of State now 3 weeks and a couple days ago, one of my highest priorities has been ensuring the finest diplomatic corps in the world is fully prepared and empowered to do its work in every corner. I'm unleashing teams to do what they do best on behalf of the American people. Last week, I held my first town hall in which I laid out my vision and committed to working as one team with all of our personnel. In 3 weeks, they've given me great support. I have taken their counsel, and I have relied on their expertise greatly. There are many challenges that remain. Among my first acts was to begin to put the team back on the field. We lifted the hiring freeze on eligible family members, indeed broadened that to lifting the hiring freeze for the entire foreign and civil service. All foreign service and civil service hiring will be consistent with funding levels, but the freeze is no longer. To help the team get on the field, I also know we've got work to do on some of our systems, IT at the front. I know our professionals need that assistance to perform their work efficiently. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to conclude my statement as it's been submitted for the record and happy to take questions from you and the committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary.